Hi, everyone who's here already. I'm Liv Subasic. I'm chair of COTE this year for AIA Austin. Stephanie is our co-chair, and we also have Kate Sector from TXA COTE, which is amazing. But I think it would be wonderful if you can chime in on the section with the question. Is totally great to me. But then if, at the end, we'll also do questions to go back to anything that maybe you had some like time to think about. Okay, well, I guess we can get rolling. People do we have? Seems good. All right, so we're going to be giving, and just so everyone knows, I had circumstances in which I had to take this workshop in not the most convenient place, so I apologize if there's noise in the background. We are going to do a walkthrough of the 2026 Common App application for the Design Excellence Awards. This is pretty much the same. Actually, I'm pretty sure exactly the same as last year's application. So we are going to walk through it in a really general way to just give everyone a scope of everything that's included. And also, there's a couple of harder to obtain metrics that we're going to try to help y'all understand and be able to get. So the goal of this application is to give an understanding of your project's impact on the environment in 10 ways that are part of the AIA framework for excellence. And they are what these little icons stand for, which is design for integration, design for equitable communities, design for ecosystems, design for water, design for economy, design for energy, and design for well-being, design for resources, design for change, design for discovery. So it's important that when you fill out the application, you fill out the entire application. That's how we like to do it in Austin. And it's if you're not like, don't be intimidated by the fact that maybe one of these or several of these 10 aren't something that's huge about your project. We realize in Austin that we also have a very residential design heavy field. So don't worry about scoring perfectly. uh, it's more important to fill everything out so that there's a good understanding because the judges are going to take this into consideration. But of course, they're going to take other things and the other parts of your application into consideration too. So it's just important to be thorough in it, but it's not. It might seem like a lot, but it's a lot of yes or no questions, and then we'll go over some of the narratives and metrics, but a lot of the narratives were covered in the narrative workshop. So one of the first things I filled in some fake data within this one just so you could see. So to start off with, this is showing how you're sort of measuring on all of the different metrics, and it creates this sort of spider web visualization. It's something that the judges can see automatically, like what parts your project are really shining in or really valued, etc. So as you fill out the application, the spider web sort of fills out. So I only got to filling out this fake one to about 4 and 5. So um, that's why the rest of it is not spider webbing yet. But besides that, the basics of this is if it is a gray cell, fill it out. If it is a white cell, do not fill it out. That's calculations, that's other information. And in this one, right now, there is some green and purple highlighting. That is not in the uh, formal one. That's for me and Stephanie as we broke up who's going to talk about what. Um, and also, and I didn't mention at the top, you can get this application in the submission form at AA Austin. Go to Design Awards, submission form, you find this. So the first intro section is just really basic data about your project. And then down here, there's some use data. which is, again, something about this application that is wonderful is that if you scroll over here, excuse me, if you scroll over here, there are descriptions and links, which is very helpful. Oftentimes, if there's anything that's not obvious or a narrative, or even a lot of the narratives have descriptions, you can find information about it over here. So, for instance, um, your climate zone. Austin is 2A. And the link for this is the ASHRAE Climate Zones document, which is a very long document. An easier way to find out a climate zone for your project, just so you know, is you can go to FIAS's website, which is a passive house organization, and you can just put in FIAS climate zone map, and that gives you a much more just straightforward map instead of this long document, but it's the same information. And then, so all of this is typical information, size, square footage, lot size, cost, when it was permitted, etc. And then you get down here and you have use data. So if it's a house, it's going to be 168 hours per week because that's 24/7. But there is calculations over here, weekdays 9 to 5, 40, etc. Typical occupancy, that's when it would be, for a house, you could do 4 or 5. For a commercial space, I'm pretty sure you would do what your building was um, meant to be occupied at. And then for the 2030 commitment rating system, is this submitting firm a signatory of the AIA 30 commitment? These are all things that you can find the link for over here. So if your firm isn't in the AIA 30 commitment, you can get signed up for it here. You can get your project registered with DDX, which is just a tracking by AIA Austin of energy information, etc. So those are easy things to get signed up for. And then if so, record the certifications and years achieved if already certified by a third-party rating system. So this is something too where if I say no here, then just make sure I don't have anything underneath it because um, this question is asking about the one above. So little things like that, just take a look at. But then design for integration, we don't need to go over this one. Because this is mostly narratives. So it's about project summary of your home, client impact statement, statement of design excellence. There are great prompts on the side here for that. And so we're going to go ahead and skip to measure 2, since those are more narratives. Does anyone have any questions on those on the intro section or section 1? Okay, great. So design for equitable communities. In these, we'll be talking again, this is a lot of yes or no. And the most important thing is that if you're saying yes to any of these questions, make sure that you follow up on why in the narrative. So, for instance, does this project benefit people who are not directly associated with the project? If I say yes, I really need to give an example of how, especially if it's um, a single family residence. Maybe you made a pocket prairie in the front yard of the single family residence. That is definitely something that would benefit the neighborhood, brings pollinators. It's something great for people to walk and look at. Little things like that do count. But the pool in your backyard saying that, like, well, that's for the community, not so much, it's making sure that you're giving the benefit to your project of some of the wonderful things you did, but not maybe overstating what you've done. Did this project take steps to avoid materials and manufacturers that perpetuate exploitative labor practices? That is something that you're gonna have to kind of look into a little bit, but for the most part, like right here, such as vinyl, quartz, countertops, tropical hardwoods, natural gas, etc. That's something where it's like we have some control over that. We don't have some. So if you give a hard no on that, which is really hard to do, make sure you explain that that was something that was really a part of the process in the design. Again, these are yes or no questions. Access, does the design accommodate low carbon modes of transportation? Again, that's something that not always you have a lot of control over if it's a single family home, but if it's a commercial project, did you incorporate bike lanes or bike racks or anything like that? Um, does the design address inequitable access to nature, exposure to heat, exposure to pollutants in vulnerable frontline communities? So shade structures, etc., would count towards that. Again, this is where we're saying that like don't get scared because of your project type if some of these things don't apply to you, because there will be other parts of it that will greatly apply to you. Are universal design principles incorporated in the project to meet the needs of people with diverse abilities? There's lots of things that in Austin, as a part of our code, we have to do for that, for visitability, etc. So those are things that you've probably had to work into your project because it's a part of our code. And so you would give yourself a yes on those. There's things like that too with dark sky, for bird safety. Just make sure that there's a lot of things about Austin's code that actually force you to answer yes on some of those things. So make sure that you do say yes, because you might be thinking, oh, well, that's just how we do it here in Austin, so I have to do that. But make sure you give yourself credit. Does this design address passive survivability? That's a really interesting one that I want to highlight. If you are designing in a way that either really mitigates flood, you had extra insulation or really good insulation in which that would allow for you to actually, when the heat goes out or the AC goes out, your house can stay colder for longer. Things like that, they might be little or you didn't realize that you did them. Even you could say something like, if you design for cross breeze at all, then you can put that in there. So just make sure that you think about the different ways that your house as a shelter could help people through any sort of climate crisis. And don't say like, oh yeah, if it's flooding, it has a roof, so passive survivability, like we got that, but give yourself credit where credit's due for some of those things. And then underneath here is global impacts, which the actual information you put into this is later in the section. So this is all white. Don't mess with it. I'll tell you later in the section where it applies about how to get this total embodied carbon number. All right, Stephanie.
Yeah, hey, I'm Stephanie, the co-chair for COTE. I'll cover these next couple of sections here. But before we get into those, does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, cool. Feel free to interrupt me if you have a question as well about the section that I'm talking about. So yeah, this next one is design for ecosystems. Just to kind of reiterate the point that Livia said earlier, always make sure you're filling out the whole application, because like this first question here in this design for ecosystems can add a lot of context to why you're answering yes or no for some of these things. Like Livia was saying, some of these projects, not everything on the Common App is going to apply, and they are looking at your application holistically. Not every project is going to have all of these things applied to it. And so you're not getting discounted for not having those things. It's all within the context. So for the design for ecosystems, the first question here is, what is your site context / environment? It's a drop down. You can choose suburban, I think it's suburban, urban, rural, residential, or just those three. Okay, urban, suburban, and rural. So that can really help contextualize a lot of your answers for these other things as well. And then pretty much everything else here is just yes or no's, or just questions as you were designing the project. So was the site previously developed? Yes or no. Does the site restore, preserve, or increase habitat for local fauna and pollinators? Yes or no. This you can look at the description on the side over here to kind of help answer that question. And I think, yeah, so the links and support here, there are 3 links that will all be helpful in determining like, do you get credit for these things or not? I think, especially with like bird-friendly design, I think a lot of us work with dark sky with both residential and commercial, so that a lot of people are very familiar with that. We do have the link there if you want to look into that more for the particular project you're filling out the Common App for. But like bird-friendly design, definitely check those ones out. These are longer documents, but they're more just like resources for you to see if you are doing something for local flora and fauna that maybe you didn't even realize was adding to that, and then you can get credit for that on this application too. Um,
Before you jump to the next section, Stephanie, I had an example too. We love to use this app. I'm going to drop in the chat here. It's called EcoRegion AppSpot. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it's a really cool tool to look at your different ecoregions. So whether you're designing new or in the future landscape, it's just a really great way to get to know the area that you're designing in. So if you're not just designing Austin, across the country, across the world, wherever it might be, this is really cool, and it tells you kind of about endangered species and things that you could be paying attention to in your design.
so yeah, maybe we can get that added to the link on the side too. The links on the side. Thank you. Um, yeah, so I think that pretty much covers. Oh yeah, what percentage of landscape design is native vegetation? Um, if you're working with a landscape architect too, you can get that information from them for these um, for each of your projects. But that would just be, I think that's a drop down with just like increments of 10%, right? Yeah, increments of 10% there. So you just kind of round up or down to whichever one makes most sense. Um, and then, yeah, also too, with Livia saying, if you answer yes to any of these, make sure you kind of write out in the narrative the explanation for that. Or if there's a no and you want to explain why there's a no, that's another really good prompt for these narratives at the end of each one. They might have gone over some of these narrative sections in the storytelling workshop, but even if not, they have some optional prompts off to the side too, if you feel like everything in your project is kind of explaining those yes and no's on its own. But that's kind of a helpful additional prompt that you can fill out there. And then design for water. Um, Very similar section. All of these are yes or no. I think in general, each of these, if you were thinking about them while designing, it's a pretty simple answer. Stormwater managed on site, potable water used for irrigation after plants are established, gray water, black water reused on site. All of those are usually things that you're thinking about pretty early in the design, but you can just answer yes or no there. And then for the project design meeting EPA water sense, there's a link in this section too. It's kind of just for the broad like EPA water sense website. It'll define what that means. But you can just kind of look into like specs for all of the plumbing and appliances that you're using. I think in general for commercial, you usually have to use water sense appliances across the board, but if you're doing residential, there's a little like a little logo that you'll find on the specs. If it's applying, it's basically just like a more efficient plumbing fixture for water flow. Um, so yeah, I think that pretty much covers that one. And then design for economy, you'll see these first two sections. They'll be blank before you've filled yours, or if you open like a brand new document, the 500 and 750 there, that'll be blank. Those are the white ones that you don't want to touch. I think that comes from the very first section where you're filling out like square footage of your project. And it'll go ahead and do the calculations for you. So you don't have to fill that one out. But then just a simple yes or no for does the project address issues of affordability, and does the project reduce built area by designing spaces for multiple purposes? Should be pretty self-explanatory based on the design of the building, but you can get into that as well with the narrative kind of explaining those yes or no values.
All right. And before we get into designing for energy, which has some of the metrics, I will also later share a link in the chat. There's a something that I think that's interesting for designing for water or ecosystems and some of the other later narratives, not so much the yes or no. Again, we want y'all to be specific in your narratives and not feel downtrodden if you have to say no to a lot of things because you can explain your project because a lot of times we have these goals and intentions in mind in our projects and they aren't always explained by these yes or no's, right? And it's like we want the application process to inspire people to when they're designing in the future be like, oh, I remember the Common App said this and this about designing for water. Maybe we can get some more yeses and less no's on this application for this project. um, that is the intention of this being a part of the awards. But there is a link to a website and that has the it's called like 6 biophilic design aspects. And there are things that a lot of us do normally that we're taught in architecture school that we might not even think of as biophilic at this point. And I think that's something that can help you with some of these narratives if you're feeling a bit downtrodden by maybe your having to put more no's than yeses. So on that, we're going to go into design for energy. So this one can be really tricky, especially for um, single family homes. So you select your energy code. It gives you a benchmark EUI. And the EUI is basically here, I have it written down exactly right here for us all to look at. Your total annual energy divided by your conditioned floor area. So if you're doing a commercial building, you will typically get this by your simulated from your MEP engineer. Um, and so that's where is the building all electric? Is that for emergency power? You would put, wait, am I confused? I actually am a little confused about the answers on this one. Kate, this feels like this would be a yes or no.
Something does seem a little off there.
So this seems off, and I don't know if it's something that happened in the download, but this should be a yes or no. And then this one should be how is the energy being tracked and recorded for this project? And then there should be maybe I accidentally deleted something. So this is what happens when you accidentally click the wrong cells. Um, and you can always just download a new one and start again. But there should be a third question here that says, like, how are you tracking? So we'll go to here. Is this building all electric except for emergency power supply? You should have a yes or no drop down for that. And you would select yes or no. How is the energy performance being tracked and recorded for this project? And that's where you would select outreach, consultant, involvement, collaborate, shared leadership. So that would be something that would be very much a part of if this project was doing a specific post occupancy report. So I believe that's where you would, select actual post occupancy. If you're not having an actual post occupancy, I don't think those things apply so much. But this drop down should actually be for how are you tracking it or how is the energy being what's your method? So actual post occupancy data, simulated energy model. So for commercial buildings, this would be what you get from your MEP engineer. So just call them and talk to them about it. And then it's not, or it's energy code minimum. You can select that and it whites out some things for you. So then it doesn't do the calculation. But also, so for single family homes, if you happen to have, we've talked about this as a group, and I feel like 6 months of electric bills or energy bills, you could double that to get to a whole year value. Again, that's still pretty tricky, and you would want to explain that in the narrative somewhere because in Texas, if you have 6 months of summer and 6 months of the rest of the year, that energy bill might look really weighted or really not weighted. So, but the best for a single family home, if you didn't have an MEP engineer or you didn't have some sort of energy model, the best would be to have a full year of energy bills and use that. And so then you would take that information and put it in here. So if your building is all electric, you select your units that are on your energy bill or on your simulation or post occupancy report, which would be amazing. And then you put in the amount. And then if you have other fuel types, you put those in here as well. And then it does calculations for you to then, so you actually don't have to get your EUI. You put, because the application already has your square footage information and then you're putting in the energy usage information, then it calculates that for you. So all of this is to get both an energy usage and looking at carbon. So then annual energy production, if you have solar panels or if they're planned solar panels or not, there's options for all of those. Planned, you can see whites out the rest of this right here. And that's because you don't need to do any of that information. But let me show you something. If you hit installed and then you went and put 150 here, and then you went back and hit planned, it's still calculating that information. So make sure if you hit planned or if you've hit not included, that you don't have, you see how even now this is whited out and there's still info down here. You want to make sure this cell is blank. So if we go back to this. And so this is all information about your solar panels as well and how much energy they're producing. This is stuff that you also get from the client or the MEP engineer. And then it gives you a total carbon summary. Again, this is where it shows you the energy use intensity, which is that EUI number. And then you go on in these to describe your energy narrative. So for instance, if you are doing a post occupancy report or you have planned solar or et cetera, maybe things that haven't happened yet, or you couldn't get energy bills for the single family home, then maybe you can go in down here and talk about energy saving measures that you did use, because these will be a part of your application too. Okay, are there questions about this section? I know it's kind of tricky. Or if anyone has comments on or other resources on how to get some of these
I
metrics.
can add another comment. One thing I think just to pay attention to on this page is that there's a lot of different units. So for example, your electricity bills are probably in kilowatt hours, but this is listing, megawatt hours, kBTU. So just, pay attention to what you're entering because there are big differences. The numbers will kind of really throw it off. So if something's looking really crazy, like it shows you have like 300% reduction or something, probably check your units, is what I would recommend. And then
Right.
also, I'm going to drop something else in the chat. If you're someone who's not doing energy models or PV studies right now, but you want to get into it on a future project, or even you just want to go back and test your project, if you're using Autodesk Revit, they have a free energy model and solar panel sizing tool. And my coworker just did a free course with Autodesk Insight. So, and it's got some other tools in there, but I'm going to drop that in the chat too. So,
Thank you, Kate. That's an incredible resource.
yeah.
And right. And I'm very glad you pointed out, because all of this information is to get to in this annual energy consumption, not just your EUI or how your building is using energy, but also what's your reduction from the benchmark, which is again your energy code up here. So just showing like if you're doing better than what's typical, this would highlight that. Okay. Anything else before we move on to well-being? Great. Okay, so well-being. This is things like daylighting, indoor air quality, operable windows. This is one where it's really easy to get some yeses, which is great, because they're things that as architects now we always think about. Things like were any specific chemicals of concern avoided during material selection. I think that's a really interesting one that can be, I know working in the single family home, there are lots of thoughts about mold and what kind of paints you're using, et cetera. So even if you went like a little bit of an extra mile and made sure that you got all no VOC or low VOC paints, that's an opportunity to talk about things like that there. Um, Design incorporates connections to the outdoors and or opportunities for physical play. This is where, let me drop in that link really quick. Sorry, I only have one screen today. You'll have to see how the sausage is made. Let me drop this one in the chat. I think this is a great link for, this is the biophilic design principles. I think that one will help you a little bit with connection to the outdoors or opportunities for physical activity. And that is one where, if it's a single family home and y'all have a climbing wall in the house or something, you totally get to be like, yes, on that. That one doesn't have to be physical. It's just physical activity for the occupants. It doesn't have to be for public. Okay. Air filter. Was ventilation either natural or mechanical optimized for occupant health? If you worked with a mechanical engineer or MEP engineer to like really right size your HVAC system for your house, that's something you can talk about on that. That's one of those where it's something that we is a little bit more forefront now. Okay, design for resources. Did the project reuse any existing structure? What percent of the existing structure was reused? Identify the primary structural system. So these are all, we've got yes, no's, and then concrete, steel, heavy timber, mass timber, wood, mix, other. Was a whole building environmental life cycle analysis conducted? Provide total predicted embodied carbon results. Okay, so this is just one cell that could be really hard for you to figure out if this was not a part of the design. I have a tool that I find really easy. Kate shared one with me the other day as well. Kate, can you drop that one in the chat and explain that after I talk about this one?
Yes.
So this one is one that I find really easy to use, and I'll drop the link. It's called Builders for Climate Action Beam. It's a embodied carbon calculator. It is a spreadsheet that you get. Hopefully it will let me show you. But it is a spreadsheet with different tabs. Here we go. In which you can put in here. Here's a little run through of it. And this website is great. It has a lot of free content. This is a free service. I scrolled past some payment options. They allow you to contribute if you want, but you can also use it for free, which is really wonderful. But this
Sorry to
basically,
interrupt. We're just
oh no,
seeing
please do.
the Excel sheet still.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Let me share the right thing. Thank you. Share whole screen. Okay, are you seeing a website now? Fabulous. Okay, so this is Builders for Climate Action website. This is the Beam tool. It's an embodied carbon estimator. You can download it. You can use it on Google Sheets. It basically you go sort of system by system. You go footings and slabs, foundation walls, structural elements, um, roof, siding, interior walls, and you just go through and you select, let's see where you can see this, and you select a material that's closest to what you've got or what you put in your building. It has a database of materials within it, and then you put what percentage of your exterior walls is that material. And so in the beginning, you put in a lot of square footage information about your building. That's basically just dimensions, which is stuff that you could really easily get from any modeling software that you would be using. And then you go through and you just select what material you used for that and about what percentage of that entire system is that material. It's pretty simple. I think I've filled out one of these for a single family home in like maybe like 2 hours before. So it's not nothing, but you can actually get a number um, that's pretty reliable pretty quickly. And then at the end, it gives you a breakdown in which you would then have this pesky little number, which make sure you're again looking at the units when you're looking for the outputs. You're looking for the number in that units. And then when you put in this, like we'll put in, I kind of forget what's reasonable, but we're going to put in a huge number. Or I don't even know if that's huge. And then now, if you go back up, that's being recalculated into some of these other, where is it? Right here. It's getting calculated into your global impacts and the social cost of that. So it's sort of sneaky that it's in here. But I like to use the beam estimator tool as a way to get this number, especially I've actually done it for a multifamily building before too. That definitely took longer, but it's one where it's free and you don't have to have a software plug-in. It's not connected. So if you happen to be you know, we used ArchiCAD when I um was using it. And so it was really helpful because there wasn't similar plugins that you would have for Revit. But Kate has another option that does have plugins, or does it have plugins for Revit?
No, so there are a couple different tools. If you want a Revit plugin, Tally, and I can add this in the link too. Tally is a whole building life cycle assessment tool that's much more in depth. It's another way that you can get this number. The one that I shared in the chat is called C-Scale. This is also free, and it does something slightly different. You basically put in different parameters like, is your building 3 stories? Is it 1 stories? Like, what's the size of it? So it's doing some sort of almost like AI style generation, um, describing your building. And then you can put different inputs into it. So it can either be super high level or it can be really specific, like your actual assembly. But we've been using this one a lot, even just during the design process, because you can do a baseline building versus a more advanced one. So you can test different options. Like if you have a commercial building, refrigerants tend to be a pretty big impact. So like having discussions with your MEP to improve that. So this is another tool that you can go through, which I think is pretty awesome. And it's your whole portfolio too. So if you have multiple projects and want to start building them out, it's pretty nice graphically.
Great. Yeah, so those are two options. Those are two options to get this sort of pesky number. Um, and if it wasn't something that was a part of your project and that you were modeling for and uh, from the beginning. Okay, we're gonna go quickly through these last two so that there's time for questions.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll cover these last two as quick as I can. I think in general they're also a really quick bunch of yes and no questions. This first one in design for change, what is the designed lifespan of the building? You can reference the units and definition over here. It gives kind of a basic idea for what you can put in there. 30 years for stick frame building, 100 years for concrete, steel, heavy timber, and 1,000 for solid masonry. Um, And then I'll also just, while we're over on this side of the spreadsheet in the links and support here, this is something that Livia and I saw earlier today. If you click on that, it's actually an internal link to this Excel sheet. It'll just take you up to an earlier portion of the sheet where passive survivability was already defined. I just wanted to point that out because it kind of feels like a mistake when all the other ones take you to like a browser link. So that one is not, it's not broken, just it takes you to an earlier part of the sheet. Was the building designed for disassembly? That's usually a pretty early discussion in the design process to just answer yes or no. But the description here also gives some examples for what that would be. With future flexibility designed into the program, can the building remain useful for a short time without utility power? That one has, I think that's a little bit more than yes or no, but the responses in there are pretty self-explanatory of like, yeah, it's all good if you have a power outage or it's passive survivability. Those can kind of help you answer that question.
Sorry, I do want to interject there really quick.
Mhm.
I said earlier to like I was talking about when I said talking about passive survivability in the narrative. I did not mean give yourself a yes if you don't qualify for what is passive survivability, which is what that link takes you to, which is it says it's like 2 days of being without power, you're being able to be comfortable. So that was where what I meant to say was you can talk about in your narrative about how you're more passive, have more passive survivability, but that is actually a defined or has a definition up above. Just to correct myself there. Sorry, keep going.
Very good. Um, yeah, and then has the design considered the impact of environmental or social risks of the building's lifespan? Identify a local risk that the project has been designated to mitigate. That one also, if you just click on the drop down, has some answers for like flooding, earthquakes, extreme hail. Like there's lots of options here. Pandemic, epidemic. If you're working on like an air quality focused building, especially if you're doing like hospitals and medical facilities, that would definitely be one that would be super applicable to you. Um, and then design for discovery. The shortest section was a post-occupancy evaluation planned or will this be conducted? Was an occupant satisfaction survey planned or will it be conducted? And were improvements made during occupancy-based findings? So this one is all about the occupancy, post-occupancy. Are you kind of checking in with the design after you've completed it and seen it through CA? Are you, this is just kind of making sure um, are you learning from the projects that you're making and aiming to improve on future ones? And then you can get into that a little bit more with the narratives too, especially if you've already conducted a post-occupancy survey. You can kind of get into what you discovered from that and how it's impacting your future projects or even current ones if this one was completed a while ago that you're filling out the application for, or you can just talk about how they've helped you in the past. And so you're going to be doing one for this one. It just hasn't happened yet. So yeah, that's that section. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I think that's one that you can dive a little bit deeper into the narrative too. So I think that was all of them. Does anybody have any questions overall now that we've gotten through all of the sections?
I'm just going to copy this into the chat real quick.
Yeah, I mean, if there's no questions, I think we can follow up with all of these links that were in the chat and maybe some other resources too. I think, oh, Livia, did you want to go over, I think there was that sheet of resources, or was it just the biophilic design
Let me
link that
make
you
sure there
earlier?
wasn't anything else on there that would be useful.
I did one general resource is just the AIA Framework for Design Excellence website. It goes through essentially all of these topics. Like the Common App wasn't just created out of nothing. It's in alignment with the AIA's broader goals around design excellence. And so I think again, if you're just like, I want to see other case studies or see how this is actually implemented in practice, it's a really good resource, and it has even more tips and tricks and case studies there too.
Um, oh, there was last year, I think we recommended that if you um did not have enough um energy use data for like 6 months or a year at least, you can use this website, energy.gov, and I will, which we still have, thank goodness, which I can send in the chat, where you can actually go in and put in all of your appliances and utility rate, and you could add it up all that way. If you're trying really hard to get that number, it's not very accurate. I would really flag that in your narrative as like, and really that's more of just like, at that point, I would say that's for you like wanting to understand a little bit more. Um, I wouldn't, I'm actually gonna go back and say I don't suggest that. It's just not gonna give you something accurate, more accurate than not answering that. But that was the last of the links I had in my other sheet. So, and then one thing I would definitely say, just since we don't have any questions, definitely don't. I found, oh, it says it right up here. Make sure you read this. It does not work in Google Sheets. Download it and open it in uh, Excel. It does not work in Google Sheets. So that's really important to remember.
And then also, I think Ingrid, you might be able to speak to this a little bit more, but this meeting was recorded today, so I think we'll have it accessible if you don't have to memorize everything that we've said. You can access it and look back at it as you fill out these common apps.
Yes, absolutely. We'll have it on the AIA Austin YouTube channel.
And last year's is on there, and I think there is also a resource on the energy section on there as well. So that's another great source.
But please send an email if you have any questions, and I'll make sure to get them to Stephanie and Liv. I think Liv and Stephanie, your email addresses are on the COTE page. Is that correct?
Should be. I haven't checked,
Yeah.
but I will now.
Yes. So please submit for design awards. We want your submissions.
All right, y'all. Well, hopefully that made it feel a little bit less daunting. It's a lot of yes or no. There is a lot of writing, but that's what you're gonna have to be writing narratives for your project anyway. And there's tons of prompts, and it's just describing your inputs. And if there's anything not in the input that you want to talk about in each section, that's what the narrative is. So, um, yeah, please send your applications in.
Yes, thank you so much, Stephanie and Liv. And Kate, thank you so much. And just so everyone knows, we also, for the TXA Design Awards, they also use Submittable and they also use the same common app. So it's a twofer.
Yes, and I will mention that with TXA Design Awards this year, we have a slight change where in addition to the Common App, they're asking for a page that summarizes your top measures that you want to talk through. So 2 or 3. So if you really felt strong about water, energy, or resources, whatever it might be, if you're applying to the TXA one, just consider that. You might need a page of a graphic or just some text.
Good to know. All right, thanks so much. If no one has any questions, I guess that's it for now. Thank you.